British passport holders have to face further delays at EU borders with fingerprint and facial scans planned from October next year. Brexit is the term used to describe the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union, the EU. It was a complex and controversial process that began in 2016 with the referendum in which the British people voted to leave the EU. The UK had been a member of the EU since 1973, but there had always been a strong current of Euroscepticism within the country. This was due to a number of factors, including concerns about the loss of sovereignty, the perceived negative impact of EU membership on the UK economy, and a feeling that the EU was not democratic enough. Now we all know better. In the run-up to the 2016 referendum, the two main campaigns were the Vote Leave campaign, which argued that the UK would be better off outside the EU, and the Remain campaign, which argued that the UK would be worse off outside the EU. We know now who was right. The referendum was held on June 23rd in 2016. The turnout was high, with 72% of eligible voters casting their ballots. The Leave campaign won with 51.9% of the vote, while the Remain campaign won 48.1% of the vote. Following the referendum, the UK government began negotiations with the EU to agree the terms of its withdrawal. These negotiations were complex and protracted, and they were often acrimonious. The main sticking points were the future of the Irish border, fishing rights, and the financial settlement that the UK would have to pay to the EU. And after 18 months of negotiations, the UK and the EU reached a withdrawal agreement on November 24th in 2018. The withdrawal agreement set out the terms of the UK's departure from the EU, including the date of withdrawal with January 31st in 2020, the future of the Irish border, and the financial settlement. The withdrawal agreement provided for a transition period of up to 2 years after the date of withdrawal. During the transition period, the UK remained bound by EU law and continued to participate in the single market and the customs union. This was done to allow for a smooth transition to the UK's new relationship with the EU. The UK and the EU also agreed a framework for their future relationship. This framework covered a wide range of issues, including trade, security, and cooperation on scientific research. However, the details of the future relationship were still to be negotiated at that time. The transition period came to an end on December 31st in 2020, and this meant that the UK was fully independent of the EU from that date onwards. The UK has since negotiated a free trade agreement with the EU, the so-called TCA, but this agreement does not give the UK as much access to the EU market as it had before Brexit. It's too early to say what the real long-term impact of Brexit will be on the UK economy. However, there is quite some evidence that the UK economy is performing worse than it was before the referendum. For example, GDP growth has been weaker, and not to forget the labour shortages. Brexit has also had a significant impact on the UK's political landscape. The country is more divided than it has been for decades, and there is no clear consensus on the future of the UK's relationship with the EU. So Brexit is a complex and controversial issue that will continue to have a significant impact on the UK for many years to come, and topics for many videos in many years to come. And UK passport holders are, because of Brexit, now set to face huge delays entering Europe from next autumn with the introduction of post-Brexit fingerprint checks and face scans. Sensitive personal data will have to be handed over to European Union border officials under the new Entry-Exit or EES system, which is set to replace passport stamping for third country travelers to the EU. The French public finance watchdog Cour des Comptes released a report this year which estimated that queues at the UK-France border would at least double when the EES is launched in 2024. Fingerprints and facial scans will be taken from British travellers the first time they cross into the EU after the digital border system starts, and this information will be entered into an EU-wide database. Eurotunnel, which runs a car transport service between Folkestone and Calais, confirmed with that it has been discussing October 6th with the French government as a potential launch date for the system, a date first reported by the British Independent. The company is currently working on testing and implementing the technology, which will see personal data collected at borders enter an EU-wide database. The European Commission is yet to confirm a launch date for ESS, though. The non-profit group Statewatch, which monitors civil liberties in the EU, predicts that technology firms could make millions of euros from operating the EES, while travelers could face hefty delays. The Austrian government has estimated that waiting times, often already lengthy, will double when the system comes into use. That's what the group director Chris Jones said. And he said, holidaymakers, workers, students, and people visiting their families are unlikely to experience the convenience and efficiency promised by proponents of the system. Instead, it seems the main beneficiaries will be police and border agencies hungry for more sensitive personal data and the IT companies that stand to make hundreds of millions of euros from the contracts for setting up and operating the system. Well, since Brexit, the UK has become a third country to the EU, and Britons have been required to get their passports stamped on entry and exit from the Union. Post-Brexit passport checks have already resulted in long queues at Dover, not only there. Introducing the ESS in October would spare British passport holders traveling to next summer's Paris Olympics from the digital checks, but families taking half-term breaks in the EU in October could face delays due to the new system. France has reportedly ordered 540 data kiosks and 250 tablets for processing ferry passengers. The system was first planned when the UK still was part of the EU, but it has been postponed on several occasions, while EU member states have faced difficulties in combining their systems with a wider database. The new border system will register the data in place of entry and exit of the traveler. It will replace passport stamping, which is used to check that third country travelers have not stayed in the EU for more than 90 days in any 180-day period. UK passport holders, like other non-EU travelers, must also meet new entry requirements when they are launched, including the EES. French authorities will operate the EES border checks at the port of Dover, Folkestone for Eurotunnel, and at St. Pancras International for Eurostar departures. Doug Bannister, chief executive of the Port of Dover, has previously warned of the long queues that could result from the new border system. Post-Brexit passport checks have already resulted in long queues at Dover, including last Easter, when holidaymakers reported waits of up to 12 hours. Bannister has said that an app could be developed to allow passengers to start the EES registration process before they arrive at Dover. And Gwendolen Cazenave, chief executive of Eurostar International, has suggested a similar approach for the rail operators' customers. What we are pushing with the EU is to have more pre-registration operations done on your couch. That's what she told the British Guardian. And a spokesperson for Eurostar said, "We are working closely with the UK and EU member states authorities, as well as with our station owners, to prepare for the implementation of EES. We are actively engaging governments to try and find solutions to preserve a smooth travel experience for our customers." And meanwhile at Dover, there is a plan to reclaim land in the port's western docks. While originally intended for cargo, it could be used to hold ferry passengers when EES begins. Getlink, which owns Eurotunnel, is spending £100 million on a new area where passengers will be able to register their data for EES. The EES system will apply for entry to most EU countries, but not Ireland or Cyprus. It will also be implemented for travel to Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. Biometric data that is taken from non-EU travelers on the first time they enter the EU when EES has launched is likely to be erased from the system for data protection reasons 3 years after their last trip to a country using the system. Nationals of countries requiring a visa to enter the EU will not have their fingerprints taken, as they will already have provided fingerprints as part of their visa application. Once EES is underway, the next change to rules for travel to the EU will be attires, which will be required for entry to the Schengen area at a cost of €7 per person. This visa waiver, similar to the US ESTA, will be introduced around 6 months after EES has started. Julia Lobusset, Chief Executive of the Advanced Travel Partnership, the UK's largest network of independent travel agents, said, "When the new entry and exit system is introduced next year, UK travellers will need to be prepared for potential delays on their first trip to any of the 29 European countries involved in the new system, as they will need to have their fingerprints and facial images taken. With this information then valid for the next 3 years, they hope to see the use of automated border control checks and self-service system increase the speed of processing times and improve the overall experience for all travelers. We always recommend travelers book through their local travel agent in order to ensure they are fully aware and compliant with all travel requirements, as well receive the best value for flights and accommodation during their trip." And of course, when they make statements, they have to do some commercial here. Nevertheless, friends of mine just yesterday left Germany again back to the UK that were visiting for our Christmas markets and so on, and had a good time here. But when they arrived, they told me about their landing at Düsseldorf. They, of course, had to use the queue that was for non-EU travelers, and that was quite a long queue already, and this is without the fingerprint and facial stuff. So leaving the EU has made travel for friends of mine more difficult even. So but that was to be expected, and we talked about this several times. So that makes a difference, of course. If you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.